tuning in to this episode of Cardinal Film Fights. I'm your host, judge, and moderator, Mark Rollins. Today we have three competitors on the question of the best Scooby-Doo movie, everyone's favorite Great Dane besides Nicholas Winding Refn. See, that's where I was going to use that joke. That's it. He's a Danish person. That's the joke. Directed Drive, as I was told. Anywho, we're gonna have our competitors introduce themselves. They're gonna give their name, their year, their major, a fun fact about themselves, or just a fact about themselves if they don't think the fact is fun. But any fact about themselves is fun because I declare it so. So anywho, we're gonna start here and then move our way across.
Hi, I'm Dean. I'm a video production major and screenwriting minor. I'm a senior. And I just finished writing the script for my TV pilot, so yeah.
Ooh, that's cool.
Nice.
I'm Tiara. I am a sophomore TCOM major, history minor, film screenwriting minor. And a fun fact about me is that I got to meet David Harbour from Stranger Things in April.
That's awesome.
Lucky.
One of them, and he rubbed my shoulders, and I almost passed out.
Lucky. My name is Ben, and I'm a sophomore, and my major is telecommunications. And the fun fact about me is I actually been to a Stephen King musical up in Fort Wayne.
Ooh.
And that's called Ghost Brothers of Darkland County.
I can hear the tunes tapping already. So, the way this works is we have a 60-second introduction in which our competitors introduce what they chose and why they chose it, followed by a 5-minute forum in which they tear each other apart, build themselves up, and that is ended with a 30-second conclusion in which they take all their arguing points, wrap it up in a nice, neat little bow, and then I make a decision as to who is first, second, and third. So, without much further ado, let's get into the question, which is, again, the best Scooby-Doo movie. So let's start with Ben, then go with Tiara, and then Dean.
Well, the best Scooby-Doo movie that I could ever thought of was Scooby-Doo and the Witch's Ghost, which talks about how the gang is following this mysterious author that helped them out, caught criminals that broke into the museum, going into this sort of a town which was from the Pilgrim times, and they were investigating or helping out the author clearing out the accusations that his ancestor was a witch.
Fun.
And it includes the first appearance of the Hex Girls, which they have encountered, but I like Tim Curry when he's in the movie.
Tim Curry is always a treasure. If you're watching Tim Curry, we love you.
We do love you, Tim.
He's not watching you. So he's not. No, okay. And we'll move over to Tiara.
Okay. I'll be a little honest and say that this might be the hardest one for me to argue because this movie holds a very, very special place in my heart, but objectively might not hold up by today's standards, but it was a really big piece of my childhood because it was like one of the first Scooby-Doo movies I had seen. And I chose the Scooby-Doo movie, the live action from 2002, the very first one. And it's fun, it's silly, it sort of captures the very sort of weird humor of a 60s sitcom. It's very, very silly, and it's a lot of fun. I really enjoy it for what it is, and I can accept it for what it is. And like I said, it might be hard for me to argue, but I'll fight for it.
So when I was a kid, I owned a bunch of the Scooby-Doo movies on VHS tape. And the one that I watched the most that I wore the VHS out until it broke was Scooby-Doo on Zombie Island. That movie is such a big change from the TV show. It kind of feels like Hanna-Barbera was like, okay, so everybody thinks Scooby-Doo is silly and for kids. We're going to make it less silly and more adult. There's a huge tone shift, and it's the first time in any of the movies that the monster is real and not some guy in a mask. And they make a big point of that in the opening moments of the movie, that this is going to be very different than any of the other Scooby-Doo movies. the live action movie even borrowed some of the plot points from the beginning about the gang breaking up and getting back together. I think that this movie set up a lot of what the modern franchise is, and it's probably the one that holds up the best in my opinion.
And can I just mention something? If I were a criminal, I can tell you the last thing I would think of doing after committing crime is like, you know what? I'm going to pretend to be a monster and just keep people away from me. I feel like that's just not a good way to like hide under the radar.
Yeah.
So without any more commentary from me, let's get into the 5-minute forum.
So I actually rewatched this movie in preparation for this fight today because I haven't seen it in a bit, and it still holds up really well. And that movie is way darker than I remember for kids. Like, they are real zombies in that movie, and it's not. There's a moment where Fred is trying to prove that no, it's just a guy in a mask, and he pulls one of the zombies' heads off. I'm like, oh, this is a kids movie. Oh my God. I forgot about this. I also owned Scooby-Doo and the Witch's Ghost on VHS when I was a kid, and I think that one is also pretty good. I'm not going to knock it down that hard. I just think that Zombie Island was better at the time. I think that Witch's Ghost was trying to come off of that success, but I think that Zombie Island redefined what Scooby-Doo was trying to be. And the live-action Scooby-Doo movie it's definitely something.
It is.
I actually saw that recently,
It certainly
for
is
different
something.
reasons.
I
And man, that has not aged well.
It hasn't, but that's why I like it so much. I love sort of the campy humor of it, the sort of just goofy thing that they tried to do. And like they clearly tried to make it for like because that was sort of the early 2000s where like teenage sex comedies were a thing, and they tried to make that but Scooby-Doo for kids. And so it has like a weird tone to it, and it's really, oh my gosh, it's so funny. There are some jokes that, granted, don't land today, but some of them are still very funny, and I don't know. I really enjoyed it. I still enjoy it. I guess it's a guilty pleasure.
Well, I could respect how Zombie Island was really good. I mean, hey, Zombie Island did have Mark Hamill in it, but for The Witch's Ghost, that is sort of different. I mean, it did had Tim Curry in it. I mean, if we all know who Tim Curry was, he was Pennywise. He was the original Pennywise from Stephen King's It. Or he was that
Frankenfurter from Rocky Horror Picture Show.
Thank you. I guess, shockingly, he plays as the main antagonist, Tim Curry, after he revealed himself in the movie, and that when he summoned up the witch, that witch was really good and creepy. I just loved it how Shaggy and Scooby just try to pour water on that ghost witch, and the witch asked, "What was that?" And Shaggy just went, "That's strange. That should always work," from The Wizard of Oz. I mean, that was a reference from Warner Brothers referencing its own movies from its own studio. I mean, if you think about it, Warner Brothers did distribute The Wizard of Oz.
I mean, I think that Witch's Ghost is pretty good, but I think that it telegraphs who the bad guy is a lot more. I mean, maybe now because I'm an adult and I just hear Tim Curry's voice, I'm like, oh yeah, he's the bad guy. But like, it still feels like more telegraphed. You're like, oh, it's the guy that they're not suspecting. He's going to be the villain. Zombie Island has a really good twist where you're thinking, oh, there's real zombies. They're the bad guys, and actually the zombies are trying to help them from the real monsters that wear cat things.
Yeah, the Witch's Ghost also did had a twist. You may think, oh, it's going to be another classic, who's that behind the mask? But instead, after they find that first case that they try to solve, but they looked at another case, then you see that Tim Curry's character being as the bad guy the whole time, and they just brought up the real ghost where their woman who was accused of witchcraft was actually a real witch after he tried to make all these false claims that she was only a medicine woman.
I think something else that I really like about the live action is the cast. I think Matthew Lillard is a great Shaggy. He sort of encompasses in what Shaggy is, and I really like the sort of dynamic between his version of Shaggy and Scooby, and I think it's so cute, like how they sort of take a lot of the personalities from the cartoons and they sort of try to like do it like, and they it's interesting how they sort of they're a little bit older, so they don't really fit in with like the young crowd and stuff. So they're sort of trying to navigate this world, and I like how different. I like how it's not super different, but I like how they approach that, I guess, is what I'm trying to say.
Well, okay. Well, let's go into our 30-second conclusions. We'll start with Dean, then go Tiara, and then Ben.
I feel the same way watching the live-action Scooby-Doo as I do watching the Michael Bay Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. I feel like both that movie and Zombie Island were trying to update Scooby-Doo for an older audience, but the live-action one was trying to make it like this raunchy adult comedy that didn't really work, and Zombie Island was trying to treat its audience with respect. It's still for kids, but it's still fun. And I just think that a lot of stuff that Witch's Ghost did well, Zombie Island did first and did better.
And Tiara?
Okay. Yeah. Like I said, this one was going to be my hardest one, but I do think that even though some of the effects don't really hold up, the story might not be perfect, I still think it is a fun, like, comedy, early 2000s kid thing. And it is, I have so much fun with it. I'm really biased, I guess. Yeah.
And Ben?
Well, I could respect how Zombie Island was really good because it's really good and creepy in my taste, and the live action one because they had all those good actors and actresses in the movie. But with Witch's Ghost, yeah, I think it's what the writers would say. What happens if the Salem there were some real Salem witches from Salem, Massachusetts, and we see.
All right. Any facts to check, Nate?
Both are for Ben's claims. He claimed that in Scooby-Doo, the Witch's Ghost was the first appearance of the Hex Girls, and that is true. And also he claimed that Warner Bros. Is that how you say it? Yes.
Warner Brothers.
Warner Brothers made a statement about Wizard of Oz that they distributed. They did not distribute it. It was distributed by Lose Inc., which is a parent company of Metro Goldwyn Mayer.
Oh, with the lion. World's oldest lion, as we all know. They haven't changed.
Well, later, yeah.
Okie dokie. So my decision. Gonna give first place to Dean, second place to Ben, third place to Tiara. And nobody looks terribly surprised. No. So, Dean, I'm giving you first place because I think you made a good point that Zombie Island kind of updated Scooby-Doo for modern audiences, still respecting the source material, and really setting some groundwork from which other Scooby-Doo movies would further develop. Ben, I think you also made those same claims. I think Dean just made the claim that Zombie Island did it first and arguably did it more effectively overall. But I think you made some really good claims with just the respect that it's not so campy where adults can't enjoy it, but it still respects the younger audience. And then Tiara, I think
Let me give it to me.
I think I respect your adamance and your effort. I respect your effort, and I respect you for holding the beliefs that you do. But I think outside of the two, I'm going to make a confession. I saw this 2002 Scooby-Doo movie in theaters, and it terrified me. I was 6 years old. I was with my cousins and my aunt, and I just turned to my aunt at one point. I was like, I'm out of here, and I left. I just walked out of the theater. I need to I've rewatched it recently. I'm like, why was I was a coward as a kid is what I found out.
It's very silly.
Yeah, very silly. But anywho, I think just outside of the two of our generation, I don't know if
Yeah.
it's going to hold up that well.
Yeah.
So to reiterate, first place Dean, second place Ben, third place Tiara. Thank you for tuning in to this episode of Cardinal Film Fights. Be sure to like and subscribe us on all of our media platforms, YouTube, Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook, and have a wonderful time of your life.